For this week, Reso wanted to talk about RPG mechanics because RPGs ultimately are about the numbers and the levels and the experience, but some of the best RPGs are based on the systems that surround that and the kind of design that can come from something like, say, the materia system or the turn press system in Shin Megami Tensei, or how morality plays into mechanically into the Knights of the Old Republic games. And Rezo thought this would actually make for an interesting discussion.
Like you said yourself, it's these mechanics that kind of keep us playing. It kind of keep me playing the game, really. If you take away a lot of these mechanics, you end up with, you don't really have a system that you write and I even enjoy. And for me, at least, these are the nuts and bolts of the game. These are the defining gameplay loops and systems and mechanics and things that make the game enjoyable. These are the things that take a game from being a 25-hour excursion through the story to being like a 75-hour grind fest for me, where now I'm trying to take out a super boss. I mean, if these systems don't exist, I might not even engage with the game beyond the conceptual level of it. These are what matter. These are the things that I wholesale buy into JRPGs for mechanically. Honestly, without them, I don't think I'd even really find these games to be all that enjoyable. As a segue into the next bullet point here, as far as favorite mechanics in an RPG, I had a really hard time coming up with this one for myself, because there are quite a few of them I really enjoy. But I wanted to really hone down on the job systems within video games, because these are the things where the more busted and broken these systems are, the more outrageous you can come up with like diverse characters for your teams. I use the example of Final Fantasy V and Octopath. I feel like Octopath probably defines it more for me, just because you can have an alchemist, but he also has like the usable skills of a merchant, but he also has certain skills from another class as his more passive skills. So now you have this character who's not only being able to heal and poison the enemy, he can now spend absurd amounts of money to destroy enemies, but he's also gaining the passive effects of a fighter to be able to hit people insanely hard. It's, oh my goodness, I love it. It's fantastic. Final Fantasy V
Final Fantasy
Octopath
V is
really sum up a lot of why I really enjoy these systems, because they don't put a lot of guardrails on you. You're not really restricted. Yeah, you want to take a fighter and mix it with a black mage and now have this unholy abomination? Fine, go on, do it. You want to have a merchant, but he also can do skills from two other classes that may not benefit him stat wise, but gives him really unique ways of being able to handle a situation. Yeah, sure, go on, have fun, knock yourself out. I love it, man. That's like that. If it wasn't for the job system, Octopath would have been one of the shortest RPGs I ever played. But because of the job system, it took Octopath from being a 45-hour game to being a 90-hour game for me, just because the job system exists.
Octopath is an example of a game that I think is actually too big. The first one, anyway. But you're not wrong about like just how engaging the systems can be. It's like you basically take the class system, the basic foundations of D&D, and just inject it with steroids. It's like, you want to be a dancer, sure. You want to be a fighter, sure. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. You want to be a ranger who can cast fire spells, sure. Why not? Might not be mechanically viable, but you can do it.
Yeah,
And
sure. Screw it. Knock yourself out, kid. Have fun.
it blew my mind going from Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy V, and seeing that instead of just being this rigid character, like with generally set in stone stat progression, that I could basically just be whatever I wanted. And as much as 7 was the game I started with, I think it was probably 5 that made me really fall in love with the series and let me realize that, like, oh man, there's so much you can do with characters, with job systems. Tom, you have played Octopath, right?
Yeah, and I'm curious how you guys have been using the jobs, because I would go back and forth between. I loved putting like the catapult that was, and this is an Octopath too, but the catapult is doing physical damage.
God damn it!
But
You're not the only one. The catapult is way overpowered. Awesome. Who thought it was an idea to let you attack?
Yeah, at first I was putting him on. I've even forgotten what the mage's name is. The
Oswald.
Yeah, I had it on him because he could, if he was out of mana or something like that, he could always break because he could choose whatever element needed. But the stats in those jobs are based on those character stats. So if you have somebody who's using physical damage and those stats are high there, and you put the catapult on them, they do a lot more damage than if you put them on a healer or something like that. So I would sometimes
catapult. Catapult, everything's dead.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm cheating. It's a good thing you can't let every character play every job, because then the game would just be like busted.
Yeah,
but that's the best. That's the
fun of it.
Though.
And also, when we're talking about like systems like the job system, the way you can, what's the word I'm looking for? Accumulate like turns, so to speak, like extra attacks with each turn. That really sends it into like the next level. Like you can get you can power up your ability by 3 times. Then you can use Oswald's latent ability to like focus in on one enemy, and next thing you know, you're doing 5,000 damage with 1 fire attack, and the boss is dead in like 3 hits because you broke that game down and just made it your.
It's fantastic. I love it. It's the job system entirely is one of those mechanics within a video game that, if it didn't exist, I don't know if I'd be able to name too many other mechanical nuts and bolts for a video game that would still keep me as interested. I'll say that much.
Mine is actually kind of related to Octopath in a way, and more specifically like the games that company has made. Bravely Default is another one. The thing they do is the idea that you can store your attacks. You can like save them up and use them to have more powerful attacks, which means you're not just repeating the same ability every single turn. And being defensive is actually a necessity in your combat, and because of that, you have to like prioritize what you're doing with your skills. And there was a game that came out early PS2 by the name of Shin Megami Tensei 3. Have either of you played it? You have?
Yes. Okay. Oh, I love it.
And it had a little system called the turn press system. So what made the turn press system unique is that if you hit an enemy with something that they're weak against, you got an extra turn. And if you hit them with something they're strong against, or they hit you with something that you're weak against, you lost a turn and they gained a turn. So the difference between using effective abilities and not is like literally the difference between dying in 2 hits or just completely destroying the enemy with absolutely no chance to, like, for them to imagine if you got a bonus action in Dungeons and Dragons every single turn just for hitting them with the right thing. And it's so empowering to be like, I played this RPG well, and because of that, I can crush this enemy because I know its weakness and I powered up my team. What you may not know about Shin Megami Tensei is it's essentially Pokemon with Satan. And you can recruit demons into your party. And it did this system before Pokemon did, just FYI. Recruiting demons into your party, powering them up, fusing them together to get new ones, and they leveled up slowly, so you had to like fuse them to get more powerful ones. And it was essentially Pokemon. Not even joking. But you really felt like if you had the right team, if you set up the right abilities, you could like decimate this game that is otherwise exceptionally challenging. And for me, that was a system. Or you could get completely
or you forgot that your main character had a Magatama that was weak against lightning, and you got into a boss fight with Thor, and he decides to completely fuck you with Mazeo dying 3 times in a row. I mean,
so
that
the enemy can do
happen.
the same. The enemy can do the same thing to you, and if you get like sneak attacked, you might as well just restart the game. There's one particular boss in the third one. He was, I think it was the trumpeter, and he had force attacks, which at that point in the game, you don't see it often amongst the enemies that you had. And no, it wasn't the trumpeter, it was the matador. And if it was very likely you would have enemies that were weak, or characters in your party that were weak against force attacks, so he could absolutely decimate you. But if you actually took half an hour to get, like, say, a demon that was strong against force attacks, now the enemy could only take 2 turns instead of 4. And or instead of 8. Like, because they can get up to 8 if they actually hit your weaknesses, and only as little as 2 if they don't, or if they use something you're strong against. So when I had my party with like 2 enemies that could protect themselves, 2 characters that could protect themselves against that, I just completely destroyed him, and he was just like, "Bye, see you. I can continue on with the game now." And it's just so satisfying because I feel like that's the core of RPGs. Is understanding the systems and exploiting them.
Bending it to your will.
Have you played Persona, Tom?
Yeah, I've played Persona 5, and I probably got 10 or 15 hours into it, and I loved it, but I am so easily distracted. Yeah. I don't remember what happened, and that's one that I'm going to
like the one more turn and baton toss systems, but imagine if they stayed throughout the entire fight. That's essentially what the press turn system is. It's so good. But if you haven't played Shin Megami Tensei, it's really focused on like morality and like what's good and bad. Speaking of morality systems, and
I'm so excited because I saw what Thumb wrote down, and that makes me so happy.
Yeah, speaking of morality systems, go ahead.
That's the one that I wanted to talk about, and going back to Knights of the Old Republic, which is one of my all-time favorite games, which, by the way, I replayed some of it recently. It does not hold up very good. I'm really looking forward to the remake of that. And
that's not what I was expecting you to say, but
no, that
he's right. He's right though.
It's a bit rough around the edges, but
it aged poorly. But when I played it at that time, it blew my mind. It was one of the most amazing games I had played, and the morality system in it is one of the reasons. And it was probably, I think Neverwinter Nights may have had morality. I can't remember, but that game was probably the first one that I remember playing, and that morality part being a big part of the story, and it changed how NPCs interacted with you. It changed the story completely. Like everything about the game kind of revolved around the actions that you took and what decisions you made in conversations and things like that. And I thought that was really cool. And if you think back to the 2000s, like this was in almost every at least RPG at that time, like Fable, and I don't feel like it's as common today or as prominent today as it was back then. But yeah, I always would start out and be like, I'm gonna be the exact opposite of my personality. Like I'm gonna answer all these questions the opposite way that I would, and it would be kind of like escapism. But somewhere along the way, I would be like, okay, no, I'm gonna give the villager my reward because they need it more than I do, or whatever. And I would end up being light side or good by the end of it. I just couldn't stick with being a jerk through the whole game.
I think I actually like a point you brought up there about how it seemed to have fallen out of style. And I think part of the reason for that is Knights of the Old Republic kind of popularized it and made it so like Knights of the Old Republic did really well and had a morality system. So let's put morality systems in all our games. But the problem is it was in Knights of the Old Republic for a reason. Like,
right.
If you played that game, that morality system wasn't just a tacked on thing. It was actually like a core element of the story. And how you played gave you completely different abilities. Like, you literally were locked out like entire progression paths. And that's why it worked in that game and why it didn't work in other games. Because in other games, it was just like, I'm going to be nicer. I'm going to be a dick. And it didn't really impact the experience that much. It was just there because people expected it to be. And it was always really binary choices too.
Right. You could tell exactly what the game wanted you to do in each situation. Whereas I felt like in Knights of the Old Republic, and it's been years since I've played a lot of it, but I remember it being more like a personality test than a, just are you going to be nice to them or are you going to be a jerk? There were a lot of kind of gray areas that you could choose.
And the game didn't always penalize you for the game didn't always give you dark side points for doing things that were inherently wrong. Great example. During my playthrough, I was going to play dark side, but the caveat was I wasn't like insanely evil. I was more just a dick.
A bit of a dick, yeah.
Partway through the game, early on I had gotten being able to like mind manipulate people. So Jedi mind trick. And that was it's like mind domination. And what I would do was anytime I went to a starport and Zerka was like, you have to pay us a fee, I'd be like, I don't have to pay you a fee. Right.
These are not the fees you're looking for.
I never got dark side points for doing it. But you got reprimanded by your party for doing that shit.
That's a smart balance between the two. Instead of just you either punch the journalist in Mass Effect or you don't.
One party member was like, I don't know if that's how I would use my magical powers just to get out of paying a parking fee, but I mean, do you? Whereas another party member who was a Jedi would be like, that's really not kosher, dude.
And that, I can geek out on Star Wars lore all day. That's one of those things that's really weird, that why the mind trick has always been a light side power. That seems like a dark side thing, but it's Obi-Wan who does it. It's weird.
Just because it's not just as simple as it's either good or bad. Like Fable, where if I kick the chickens, I'm a demon worshiper, clearly. Or like you said, just because you did that thing, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You need that money to save the galaxy.
Don't get it twisted. The first chance I had a red lightsaber. There was no it wasn't like I was coy about where I stood alignment-wise.
I'm cosplaying a Sith. I'm really a good guy on this.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that at the last 5 hours of the game, the mask came off, and I'm like, well, actually, guys.
Do we want to talk about the big plot twist? that occurs like about 80%.
I don't want to. I
I
feel
don't
like
think so, because that is one of the most impactful plot twists I've ever experienced in a game. I 20 years later, I still use that as my like gold standard.
See, the
I-
morality
I-
system is the core of the story because you can change. Even then, you can change that choice. But what it means to the greater, like that's something you cannot do in a TV show or a movie. That is like video game
Yeah,
interactivity at its peak. Whatever you want to say about
Yeah.
its problems, that's that ability to define your character so much. You're not going to get a second cut of the movie where someone decides to be like, you're never going to get Star Wars Episode 7 version 2 where Rey decides to not be a sucky character and actually do something useful. Or Kylo Ren becomes a good guy. Like that doesn't exist. It's always that one narrative. But with a game like that, depending on your morality, the whole story changes.
right.
yeah.
Hey there, folks. I know nobody wants to listen to a creator shield themselves for 90 seconds, so I'm not going to. If you enjoyed this, we do the show live every Sunday on Twitch at 6 p.m. BST. Feel free to pop over TNEQL. And if you would like to support us in making the channel bigger and helping it grow, you can also check us out on Patreon, also at TNEQL. Take care of yourselves. Stay beautiful.